Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 31st episode of the Hipfire Podcast. As always, I'm your co host, Yasser, joined by my other co host, Seth. And we have a special guest today, as you guys may know, Passion Brait, the Croatian King, back on again for another special episode. So thank you, Patch, for coming on. But today, we got a great episode for you all to listen to. We're going to be breaking down, obviously, the CDL major that happened this most previous weekend, as well as, what we think of the top four teams that came from the CL Major, all things to talk about the AM scene and what happened with the Challenger Open this weekend as well. But first off, wanted to thank everyone for 100 subscribers. I know Seth and I didn't ever think we'd get this far with regards to creating this podcast just a year ago. I mean, this was just something to pass time during the pandemic, but to see everyone showing some support and love, really does mean a lot to us. So thank you for that again. But yeah, the CDL major we happened to have this past weekend. Obviously, FaZe ended up taking it in quite a dominant performance. Really, they looked very strong. Didn't look like Dallas really had any momentum within that entire series. Honestly, it was quite boring to watch. It didn't. It looked like one team was just beating down on the other. It looked like a optic AW performance back when they used to do that all the time. But Padge and Seth, what did you guys make of that grand finals?
You can go, Pash.
I mean, as you said, FaZe really played some immaculate Call of Duty, in my opinion. I think that Dallas didn't have a shot, not because of map vetoes, just because Simp and Abezy were just absolutely frying. And when you have best SMG duo in the game on that level, I don't think you can do much, even with a trio that is Hugh, Shotzi, and Ellie.
Yeah, I think just going into a bit of the looking at FaZe and how their entire major run led to this point. Obviously, they didn't drop a single match the entire stage one. Obviously, the only match that we've seen them lose thus far is the preseason kickoff match to uh, Florida, and ever since then, it looks like they've made real strides in their game. One thing that we saw last year with FaZe that was a big discussion, especially when they played Dallas at the champs, was the fact that this team, especially in Hardpoint, they failed to focus on fundamentals. They were always focused on breaking kills. The rotation didn't really matter because they just bully their way in. And when teams like Dallas, who played strong fundamentally, rotated and got in good positions, they ended up taking down FaZe because FaZe lacked that fundamental gameplay. But now we see that that isn't the case anymore. In this 4v4 setup with our cities, they placed a larger focus on that, and they benefited as a result. We saw in the hard points them constantly winning on rotation, constantly having really strong setups. I mean, looking at their hardpoint advanced dashboard from COD League Stats, these are stats prior to this most recent weekend's matchup, but I think it encompasses how their hardpoint went throughout really the entire stage. So of all the teams in Hardpoint, FaZe actually had the greatest overall break percentage, which isn't that much of a surprise. Um, Obviously, if you were to say which team breaks hills more than any other, I think most people would say FaZe, given their aggression. I think the key, so they were at 32.61% overall break percentage. Most other teams are around 20 to 25%. So again, ahead of the pack in that case. Although they weren't running rotation most of the time, they're actually 48.31. I think that's above what they used to be. And they're holding hills 83.72% of the time, which is, to give some context, that's around, that's a bit above average. Most teams are around 79 to 80. I think Dallas is the only one that has like a 90 hold percentage. But again, it doesn't matter if FaZe is breaking most of the time or getting the kills on rotation. So again, that shows their hardpoint dominance. But I think what most people are going to talk about, and the reason why they beat Dallas as bad as they were, was because of their S&D. I mean, 11-1, their only loss coming to the Ultra. Shout out the Ultra. Got to give the wins when they can. 11-1. They played every single S&D map and won every single S&D map more than once, with the exception of Checkmate, which they've only won once because they played it once. Their S&D stats are disgusting, especially when you look at their advanced stats as a team. To give some context, again, this is from March 6th, so this won't include the finals. But the average for regarding S&D overall offensive win percentage, most teams win offense around, let's say, 40 to 50, at most, like one team's maybe 60%. FaZe wins offense 71.43% of the time. They're winning at an astronomical rate more than any other team. Their setups, their pushes, their ability to know like mid in-game adjustments is uncanny. Know what position to get. Apply map pressure is the way they do it is honestly something just sight for sore eyes. The way that they're able to push and be so aggressive because they just know that they have better shots than most people. And I think that's just something that really stood out to me was their S&D. But other than that, what did you guys see individually from those players?
Well, for me, when I looked at Atlanta over the tournament, like he said, their teamwork and respawn was on point, as he mentioned with breaks and stuff. But also, just like an eye test, it seems like they were baiting and switching. I think the best at any other team in the CDL, especially Simp and Abezy. They it's just so fluid. They just know when to slide for somebody else, and they know when to trade for somebody else. Like they trade and bait, and like it's perfect. Like the way they play respawns is just fantastic. And then, like you mentioned for Search, if they're winning offense that many times and they're getting first bloods because of Abezy all the time, let's say on the off chance they end up in a 1vx situation, there's not a better team in like the league at 1vx's. You got Celium, you got Simp. I think it was like the Paris series where they went to a game 5 and they ended up clutching it up because I think Celi got like a 1v3 and Simp got a 1v2. I might have mixed that up, but yeah. So even if you are able to take some kills and play competitively S&D, they can still just 1v3 you out of nowhere. And they're super clutch and like yeah, it's just like really impressive to me because the issues last year, like Yas mentioned, was in teamwork and in hardpoint, especially on Gunrunner, right? We had so many complaints that they couldn't hold hills properly, but they seem to have fixed a lot of that. And again, like I don't know how much of that is RCDs because, like he said in an interview recently, he said like I don't have to do much. These guys just fry, they're nasty. Um, but
It's not wrong.
yeah, he's not wrong. But there is definitely just from watching their gameplay, there's definitely been much more of an effort to play as a team and to trade kills and to bait for each other. They're very selfless stars, which I think is what makes them so good. You never feel like one of them's kill whoring. You never feel like one of them's like trying to do too much. They all kind of know what their role is, and like it's weird because from a staff perspective or from like I guess just like I don't know what perspective, but like Celium's like sort of their worst player, which is not a problem at all if he's like the one that's not performing the best because he's still very good. And like last year, you had Major Maniac was uncomfortable at times, and you had Priesta flipping roles. So like now with this team, it looks even better than it did last year, which is just scary. That's kind of my thoughts on FaZe.
Do you have any other thoughts on FaZe Patch or?
Yeah, I do. I think people will give props to Crowder and RCDs for improvements, but I think RJ, the assistant coach of the FaZe, is a good shout as well because both of them, RCDs and Crowder, said a lot of good things about RJ, and I trust those two. Also to mention their respawn has been better just because that bait and switching you mentioned is up to perfection, and they know how and when to push. Their rate control, I think they haven't lost it yet, or maybe lost it once
Yeah, just one.
because they lost once,
Mhm.
and they are the best rate team in my opinion, both all S&D, hardpoint, and control. Just because of the way they play, they are so annoying. Bait and switch, playing fundamentally well, not giving the team easy rotations or anything like that. They're constantly putting pressure, which last year you could see that, but there wasn't that many trades. They would outslay and still lose in hardpoint. Dallas was doing that to them, and then we saw in those two series completely opposite. Dallas was out rotated, outslayed, and outgunned, which is like scary to see that team actually doing so well early in the year.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think without a doubt, this is obviously the best team in the game. They're clearly understanding the game at a higher level than everyone else right now. So it's really just a matter of who's going to catch up to this team. Because I'd expect teams to get better at respawn in particular. Um, I don't expect FaZe to only have one S&D loss in going into majors. But then again, you look at it like I can't like they're such a strong team at a core, and their team play is incredible right now. So it's going to be really difficult to see a team, take a series off them, especially when you're looking at S&D as almost chalked up. But moving on, obviously we got to talk about the team that they ended up playing, which was Dallas. There were people that were high on Dallas going into this major, figured they could take it down, and understandable so. Obviously, they were the second place team. They had won CDL champs. It was going to be interesting to see how they would go up against, the likes of Optic and the likes of FaZe. And so going back to that Optic matchup, obviously extremely close. Only won by one round. I think one thing to talk about that was impressive with Dallas was their hard point in that series in particular. Obviously, people credit Optic all the time for being an incredible respawn team, which they should be. They're arguably one of the best. But Dallas took both hard points, if I'm not mistaken, off them, and I think that was really impressive to see. Obviously, looking at more at their advanced analytics stats from hardpoint, I know Dallas is 90.24% hold rate, so that is way above that. Again, this is taken into account. This was before most of the matches. This is updated as of March 1st, so doesn't include their matches necessarily against Optic. But again, it shows that their ability to their setups are super strong. Again, they know how to trade out. They know how to keep spawns. They're winning rotations most of the time. So as a hardpoint team, they're doing a pretty good job. Obviously, that checkmate S&D, I know most people will be very upset how it ended up going. Hugh got incredible timing underneath plane to be able to shoot some guys in the back. But again, extremely strong team. I think the one thing to take away from this team, and we'll talk a bit about it a bit later when we mention our team of the major, is a guy like Hugh and how much he has stepped up since Clay has left. Because I think Maven and Merc talked about it when they were saying, oh, well, Clay left. Who's going to be that vocal leader to step up? Because they were down to FaZe. They're like, who's going to help them when they need the most? And Merc was like, I don't think Krim has to take it all on his own, as we've heard in comms. Hugh's been the one that's been stepping up, calling out where we need to be looking, where the pressure's coming from, where we need to apply that pressure on the map. It's not necessarily Krim that has to do it alone anymore. Hugh has taken that role upon himself. And you can see it in his gameplay as well. He's playing at such a credible pace and is playing with such awareness that, he's arguably one of the best players in the game. And he's been a catalyst for why Dallas has been so successful. But what did you guys see from them in that grand finals and from the major as a whole?
I mean, I'm gonna keep it kind of brief, but you already hit a lot of good topics there. But for me, going into the year, I was really high on Illy in the 4v4 COD, and he didn't exactly stand out the most on the roster last year, and he still quite hasn't hit form yet. It's gonna happen. I don't think he's a weak link like at all. I think it's a confidence thing. For some reason, it just seems like against FaZe, he just can't bring it sometimes. But like the series before that, he was playing well and frying. So it's not a question of like ability. I think it's just I wonder if he sees like the tiny terrors on the map and it's like, oh shit, this is not gonna be fun. No, he's very good. It's just like Ender, just it's gonna take a little bit of time, and especially like S&D, like that's where I thought he'd really do well, and where Dallas would really
He's a
do well.
0.8 KD in S&D.
Yeah, that's not like what do you expect from Illy at all, especially if you know his background. Like that's not really good enough, and it's not gonna last like that. It's definitely gonna get better. So yeah, that's from what I saw. It's just like Ender needs to step it up in S&D. The whole team really has to play better in S&D, and it'll get there. Early days, not too concerning. It's really good to see that, like you mentioned, the hard part about breaking up a championship team is finding the teamwork and putting it back together, especially with losing a guy like Clay. But like you mentioned, Hooks filled that role in perfectly. And also, like last year, I don't know if this is too much of a factor, but just to remind people, last year Illy and Shotzi started out really really slow, and took a couple tournaments to get them going. So maybe that could be a consistent theme this year. Maybe they just start a little slow. And by the way, second place, if that's your starting slow, that's still very good. But Paj, what you make of the Empire?
I wanna comment on Hugh here. People tend to forget that first of all, to build that Empire team in MW, he took a pay cut, $100,000 pay cut. That's not a small amount. Then after MW, he wanted to quit COD to switch to Valorant just so the other four stays together. and then now he's a vocal leader alongside Grim when it comes to comms. That just shows how he's ready to do everything to win and to for his team to shine, to let others shine, which is actually a really good thing. And he's one of people gave him crap about it before, like you didn't win, etc., etc. Like you have all these good teams and you still can't win. But like in last 2 years, I think that changed. The perspective has been changed just because of the way he plays and things he did for his teams. And I think the Hugh the Nuke is finally getting the praise he deserves.
No, 100%. And there's spoiler. I mean, I don't think it's much of a spoiler, but he's going to be part of our team of the major, or team of the stage rather, because of how incredible he is. I think one play that sticks out of my mind. Actually, we talked about this in the last podcast, so let's go to the next team. We talked about how great Hugh is, but the team that placed third, I think, surprised a lot of people. Obviously, they were my pick to win, so a bit upset that they didn't end up getting it done. But New York, obviously, really impressive performance from them. Again, going into the season, obviously, this roster's been through numerous changes. Zuma retiring was a big shock to everyone, even his own teammates, because they weren't really expecting that. A lot of people expected Hydra to be here already. He wasn't. And so they had to do with what they had. They moved Mac from his preferred position at flex, or at least what he was initially going to play, and he played as a sub instead and had Diamondcom come in, and Asim was staying on the roster. So there's a lot of questions going into with this roster was how are they going to perform? Is Clay going to be able to make it work with this, ragtag team of rookies and, players that didn't have a lot of experience? And they made it work, and it was really impressive to see. Although they didn't maybe have as much scrim time on the game as other teams, the strides that they made throughout every game mode were really impressive. In particular, S&D, obviously they had Diamondcon shot calling pretty much all their S&Ds, and they were making a lot of really smart plays together. On Checkmate, their 4x and 4 setup that they had at times was deadly. All of those players were going off. Clay, as JCap has mentioned, this looks like it might be his best game since AW, and good reason for it. In their communication, you can hear how much of a vocal leader Clay is, and that we expect to see. But again, everyone clearly respects him as a leader and is listening to him and taking his advice. And you can see how strong they have been in almost every game mode. Obviously, they're 8-6 in hardpoint, 6-6 in S&D, and 6-4 in control. They definitely have their strong and weak maps for sure that they still need improvement on. But I think the pinnacle of that team was that Optic series, which I'm sure we'll break down when we talk about Optic, but that Optic series really show what they're capable of. Obviously, Optic didn't play up to par, but you also have to credit how New York played, especially in that 4v11 control. I mean, the teamwork was absolutely on point. Bait and switching, communication of where Optic was pushing up on the map, and they all play their role to a T. Again, for such an inexperienced team, it's really impressive. I mean, Seth and I both said like they're this team might need Hydra to make it to the next level. And maybe we're wrong about that, because clearly they've shown that they can make those strides by themselves. But what did you guys make of this roster and how they did?
Well, on that note, I actually was going to say, I think Hydra for Mac instantly makes the team better. But the reason why I say that is not because Mac's bad. It's just like I don't think he's comfortable in his role. And again, he could get more comfortable with more practice. That is fair, but he hasn't seemed comfortable to me. And the nice thing about having Mac though is you can do the 3-4 XM4s on a checkmate, right? That's the nice part about having Mac still there. So in that regard, then maybe keep him on for a longer time. But in terms of like keeping up with teams like FaZe and Dallas, and you need that sub pressure, like Max I don't think he's going to cut it. He did have a really good series against Dallas, to be fair. But I think if you want a consistent outslaying, like dominant, fast-paced sub duo that's going to keep up with Simp and Abezy, I think Hydra and Asif can do it. But yeah, like that being said, like they are very good. I don't think Hydra should come in. We talked about it last podcast, so I don't want to talk about it too much. But we don't expect Hydra to come in right away. It's going to take time. And rolling with this current squad is not a bad thing. And then the last thing I want to talk about for New York is, like you mentioned, with Diamondcon shot calling S&D. I think it also points to why Clay is such a good leader, because he's obviously expected to be the vocal leader and the leader of the team, and he is. But he also has the presence to say, like, all right, we're picking up this AM player who's nasty in search. It's like kind of what he's built his young career on. Let him ride it. Let him work on the map. Let him call strats. It's just take a step back in S&D and let a couple like amateur player shot call for you. That's just like I don't know. To me, that speaks a lot to Glacier and his ability as a leader and his empowerment. I think it's really, really like what sets him apart as a leader. Because we talked about it before last year a bit when we talked about the leadership qualities between Krim and Clay and guys like Enable and different things, and kind of like Aches as well. And we're kind of figuring out like what kind of style of leadership is best. And it's almost like the LeBron effect. I feel like with Clay, where he's very like vocal leader and wants things done a certain way, but at the same time he'll also step back and let you rock and let you do your thing, right? I mean, how many years did he let Zuma do his wild flanks and do Zuma things, and kind of just let it ride and still lead, but allow his teammates to have more just ability to do what they want on the map. I just that's to me that's what stands out for Clay and why New York's so good. But Patch, what you make of New York?
I mean, it's pretty simple. It is Clay's best individual year since Advanced Warfare. I think people forgot that the rookies that come from S&D are actually disgusting. Diamond Khan has been talked about all last year. He won the challengers at the end of MW, if I'm
Yeah,
correct.
yeah,
Yep.
Diamond Con did. Yeah,
You have Asim that is a great entry, and he's for me a better version of Pristini. He's a bit more consistent than him. Then, okay, the problem with Mac and the aggression, it is there, but I don't think it is necessarily a bad thing because sometimes with that you can put a 3 AR setup, and maybe if we see a meta change with more ARs than subs, that may be a good thing. Of course, with Hydra, you can always try him out, but I think this New York team should stay unless something crazy happens. I don't think the change is necessary as of yet because a top 3 finish while beating Optic 3-0 for a top 3 is a really good showing.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
yeah. And with that, we'll talk about our fourth team. Obviously, Optic Gaming, or sorry, Optic Chicago. I do that a lot. Yeah, not exactly the performance they wanted to have at this major. Obviously, started out with a 3-0 over New York. They looked very dominant. Dashy had over 2 KD, which I want to talk about. That 2 KD over New York in that series, that has to be one of the most dominant performances in a series ever. Like, I don't think, like, I'm trying to think about back to series where players have had above a 2.0 KD and won in a 3-0 fashion, not just, stat whoring and losing the map, but winning it in that dominant of a fashion. I can't really think of many. I think one Lord Josh in the Discord was talking about was a Simp over the units. Had over 2 KD at Black Ops 4 champs. So again, doesn't happen very often. So you gotta take note of that and how impressive that performance was. Obviously, we talked about it earlier, but their match against Dallas was a heartbreaking round 11 loss. And I think the hard points is what really cost for them. For a team that prides himself on their strength and respawn. It didn't look like they were winning most of the rotations in that Dallas series. In fact, it looked like they were losing majority of them, constantly putting themselves on the back foot, which obviously is never going to go over very well with that team. You look at their respawn, their checkmate's very strong. They're 3-0 on that, which I'm assuming, and they're 3-0 on raid. So most of the time, if they play one of these maps, you're looking for a win. But in that series, they played Moscow. They lost it 1-2. I can't remember. Patch, do you remember what first map in that series was?
Where's Dallas?
Yeah,
It was Garrison.
Garrison. So if you look at the stats, obviously this is hindsight, but Garrison, they're 1-3 on now. In Moscow, they're 1-2 on now. So, you look at the two hardpoints you should be playing, which are Checkmate and Raid. You're 3-0 on both. I don't understand why Optic doesn't play one of these maps every single time they play a team. They're perfect on both. Your team can't veto both, obviously. So every series, Optic should be playing either Checkmate or Raid because they're perfect on both, in my opinion. So a bit unfortunate there. So obviously, and that sort of gets into this other conversation about vetoes. I'll let you guys talk about the players and the roster because I want to really talk about the vetoes because I felt like especially in that New York series, their video process was really confusing. When it comes to their control, especially with just the checkmate, obviously, it was a bit of a breakdown by the Optic, the group. They were 3-0 on that map previously. So looking at Optic's control in totality, they're 5-0 on raid. They have never played Garrison, and they were 3-0 on checkmate going into that New York series. Now you look at New York's records. I believe they weren't very great on raid. They also had not played Garrison, and they were roughly 2 or 3-0 on checkmate. So they had not lost checkmate up until that point either. So for that series in the specific that control, it was really up to Optic. Okay, we got to veto a map. Which one are we going to do? And Optic's philosophy has always been, and it kind of annoys me, has been we're going to play on them on our best maps because we're that strong. It doesn't really matter what they're good at. We're just going to focus on what we're good at. And that's not a bad philosophy, but in this scenario, I would have liked to see Optic, try and bully the vetoes. And what I mean by that is they know New York's auto veto, from what the looks of it or likes of it is Garrison control as well. So they both veto Garrison control. Optic, I would have liked to see, okay, we're gonna veto checkmate, which is at New York's best control. New York can either choose to, pick their auto veto Garrison, and they play a map that neither of them have played before, or New York picks raid, which Optic's 5-0 on. So, it gives New York a really tough situation to be in. And obviously, I get if Optic's really scared that they're bad at Garrison, that they won't want to pick it. But again, that's New York's auto veto too. You really think they're going to pick their auto veto just because they're that bad at raid? Maybe. But I think, Optic could have done a bit more in the veto process to at least set them up for success. But what did you guys make of Optic's run?
Well, I think Matt said it best. He said they won the coin flip with an ego child, the map vetoes. um, that's basically what happened. But I know Paj wants to talk about dashing a little bit, so why don't you go and break it down, Paj?
Okay, I'll quickly just go over the map vetoes. They really where's this, Dallas and New York? They kind of ego child the vetoes. Especially, I get the Moscow pick on hardpoint because Dallas is really good at the raid hardpoint as well, and Dallas hasn't been as successful. I think they played one or two maps, and I think they
Dallas.
lost one
So sorry, you
on.
continue. Just for context, Dallas is 1-0 on raid, and they're 1-2 on Moscow as well. Their only win on Moscow
Uh,
was against Optic. So yeah,
Yeah, so basically, like they are 0-2, let's try and surprise them, And I think that was a good thing, but like there was at one point when Onward went on that 8 streak on a rotation, everybody else was dying. Optic was down 90 points and they were getting outslayed by 2 kills. 90 points down, but only getting outslayed for 2 kills. That just shows how much they didn't play fundamentally correct at all. They just chalked it. That map was chalked from the start, from the get go. And I'll leave it at that. The New York map, yeah, they really ego childed, but I think they aren't that good at the garrison control, so they didn't want to risk it that much. But I don't know about that garrison S&D pick. I really don't know what was in their heads, but it's fine. I think they'll learn from that mistake. Also, problem with Optic and S&D. So we saw it in Empire series. If Onway gets picked, and like if he doesn't get at least one or open up a site, that round is most likely chalked for them. And for me, when that doesn't work, you have Dashi, one of the best S&D players in the league, and he's an amazing playmaker. Why don't you let him sometimes do the shots? Be that playmaker, get that first blood. Like let him do some let's say weird stuff on a map that Onway sometimes does, or something. Throw different looks at it because like New York really countered Optic at that Garrison S&D and Empire at checkmate. So really, when things go south, why don't you throw something different instead of just doing the same thing over and over again? And I think once they realize they can do that, they have really two really good S&D players and playmakers at the same time. I think they'll be championship contenders. I mean, they are right now, but if their S&D gets on par with FaZe, I think we can look at them as stage 2 or 3 champions.
no,
Yeah, yeah. I was
You
gonna
go.
say,
You go.
I was just like, I agree for sure, and like you're saying, like it is weird because I feel like they went way too strong on the envoy go kill or envoy go flank strategy. And you're right, like you have Dashy sitting right there in the game. Let him make a play. Like it's a good thing. It's a good point you're raising because like it shouldn't have to be envoy every round making a play. It's a lot of first of all, it's a lot of pressure on him, and then also what we saw is that it gets red. Teams start playing more patiently and waiting for envoy to pop up somewhere on the map, and then they kill them, and then they're on a 3v4. So like yeah, it's a really good point Patrick made there because like they definitely have to lean on Dashy more, and it shouldn't be a one man show in S&D. But
I think
yeah,
sorry, I just want one last thing to talk about that. I was going back through the stats on Breaking Point as well, and one common theme I noted for most teams is that most teams have one player stand out in terms of first blood rate. Usually, there's one person that's always pushing the pace to get that first blood. Optic's one of the few teams that doesn't exactly have that. They have Dashy at 15.5, which is the highest. Envoy around 14.4, Scum 14.4, and Formal 10.3. So Formal's obviously not pushing the pace. He's the AR. You don't need that. But they don't exactly have someone like an Abezy or Awakening or, you know, someone in that sort of caliber that's going to help push the pace to get that first blood that allow them to open up sites. And I think it's something that's interesting to note. Obviously, their S&D, you compare their win rate is 42.5% on offense. So they're actually a pretty strong defensive S&D team. It's just their offenses they're not capitalizing on like other teams are. And I think that's what's really hurting them because obviously we talked about FaZe, 70% win rate. I think New York was 55%. Optics only around 42.5%, so not amazing. So it's definitely something that they need to focus on moving forward.
Can I quickly comment on that
Yeah,
attack
sure. Yeah.
percentage? The thing is, even if Optic gets the first blood on offense, they don't get creative with it. You could see on, let's say, on MW, on when Onway was on Huntsman, even if they would get the first pick or get first pick, they would be creative with it, especially on maps like Saint Petrograd or Amaza. They would just get creative with it. Maybe not switch sides, but like switch the positions, bait them up, bait them out a bit, spread them out, spread them thin. Show something different. And they didn't show that. They only show that on Moscow because, like let's say Bruce or Formal, they work on the B Street, or let's say mid. Just constantly try and put pressure on them. But like on other maps, especially on Checkmate, they do not do that. They just push the plane. If we get the kills, we get the kills. If we don't, we don't. We lost the round, which I do not agree with at all, especially with the team that has Dash and Onway on the same team.
Yeah, but
yeah.
moving, Seth, do you have anything else to add or?
Oh no, that's good. I was just gonna say like moving on to the next next section is we're gonna talk about teams briefly here that didn't crack the top four, and some teams that would be disappointed. And so the first one is gonna be the Rocker. So the Rocker, it's an interesting team because again we're gonna say it every COD in existence. Attaches again another top 10 player, maybe even like he's very very good again. But once again, it's not coming together for him, and the team. They didn't choke. It's fine. I mean, they're a good team. It's just gonna be. We talked about it last podcast, so I don't have to dwell on it too much. But it's just gonna be the thing of like, can Priest and Attach match the sub pressure of other teams, and then is Lamar going to be consistent enough as a main AR? So far, I think Lamar's been fine. I know he had a really really bad. Was the last two maps when they lost against who did they play against?
They played against Toronto and London. Are you talking about what are you referencing? Sorry.
Who did they get Rocker get eliminated by?
Oh, Toronto.
Yes, Toronto. Yeah. Lamar had a really, really bad like map 4, map 5 in that series, if I recall correctly. So
Yeah, he did,
that kind of sucks. There's not much you can really do if you're attached in that situation. But he's been consistent enough overall. I just think like they need to kind of fit like if they're going to lead on S&Ds, they have to actually win them and not lose them. So if that's going to be what they're leading on, they have to get better and more consistent in them because like they should have beaten Ultra. We saw how Ultra played this weekend. Rocker is definitely a better team. So that's my thought on Rocker.
Yeah. No, just adding on to that. So I mean, the Rocker. I mean, they're still, I think, in my opinion, the second, or you could argue second or third, top 3 S&D team in the game. I mean, they were 6-1 going into the major. The only one they had dropped was the one against New York. And then when they played the Ultra, they dropped their second S&D in map 5, which honestly, that map 5 looks horrendous. Like that did not look like a team that's top 3 in S&D. They were pushing one by one, getting picked apart by the Ultra. Quite frankly, that was one of the Ultra's more impressive performances this weekend. But again, I think the one contention is their hardpoint is horrible. They're 2-7 in hardpoint throughout the first major, which I mean that's just not going to cut it. You're never going to win series if you're 2-7 in hardpoint. They've won one win on raid, one win on checkmate, and then every other hardpoint they have multiple losses on. So definitely a point they're struggling in. And one thing I want to talk about them is I saw it brought up by iHoldShift and his series The Playbook, which again I recommend you watch. Really entertaining. He was breaking down the hardpoint between Miami and the Ultra, and he talked about how slow the Rocket are in general. They're arguably the slowest team in the CDL when it comes to hardpoint. They're just slow to rotate, slow to move around, slow to get map pressure. They're just not a fast team. That's something that we mentioned was a concern of ours coming into the season with this team. And, even the small things where, when they go to rotate, they don't have someone, pressed up middle map just to, cut off rotation. They don't have anyone doing that. They just, they almost play a little bit too passive at times. And it really hurts them in the hard point. I mean, their overall KDs, Lamar a 0.9, attach a 1.02, and the other two are negative. And these are all talented players, but you can't have that from this kind of roster and expect to win in majority of your hard points. So again, really disappointing from them. I'm curious. Their hard point just has to get better going into stage 2. And I think if it does, I mean, their control and S&D are good enough to be a top 4 team in the league. It's just their hard point's just been so lackluster.
Yeah,
I agree with that. I really want to touch on this hard point when it comes to Rocker. Not just that they are super slow, but their pacing is so off. Like the only semi-aggressive players are actually Attach and Priesta. And Priesta found the most success when he was on that flex, not when he was a second sub. And like accuracy, for in my opinion, he needs to be faster. He needs to step up that pace because look at the best ARs in the game right now. That's Clay, that's Formal, that's RCDs. That like players like that are faster ARs. They adapted to it. They said, like fuck it. In main AR is in main AR that doesn't move his L3. Like I need to move around. I need to switch up the pace. I need to be faster a bit. I need to help my team on a rotation. Not just be like just stand somewhere. And I think if accuracy doesn't do that, I think Rocker should go for like a trigger and do the roster change in a sense of like dropping accuracy and picking, let's say, a Steam. You boom Edge Maniac to main AR, Priest to second flex, and then you have a really aggressive sub duo in Asim and Attach. But like that maybe wouldn't work. You never know. Like maybe they suddenly switch up for the second major. Like they suddenly became a bit faster hardpoint team, and like they don't have to rely on 2-3-5 rather than like 1-2 and 5 or 2-4 and 5. Like rely on their hardpoint pick, which that would make them a more dangerous team because look at them. Play, if they would play against top 4 teams, which are in my opinion NYSL, Optic, FaZe, and Empire, they are going for 2-3-5. FaZe is the best S&D team in the game.
Yeah.
Optic is the best control team in the game.
Yep.
Dallas is all around really good at every single mode. And NYSL is just a bit worse version of Empire. Like, what do you do if they take a control off you? Try and win a hardpoint when you're playing like that? You're getting hardpoint clubbed in hardpoint. You're not winning.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think one thing to even add to that is, according to colleague stats, their break percentage, most teams is around 20. I think FaZe is around 30. I think they're the lowest in the league. They have a 10% break. They don't break hills. Like like 1 out of 10 times they're breaking the hill. Otherwise, the other team's getting roughly 40 to 60 points on that hill. So that's just another bad thing. They clearly don't know team setups or pushing to break hills together. So that's another bad thing. Was there any other teams that we wanted to talk about?
I think we'll do one more, and it'll be LAG. I mean, you can obviously talk about the Thieves, but
Okay.
I think they, this is actually more surprising because they beat the Thieves. The
Yeah.
one thing I want to say about LAG though is we said it before last podcast. Yas mentioned like don't sleep on them, and the reason why you don't sleep on them is not because of the most skilled and best gun skill team in the game, but because I genuinely think they're going to be like the best practice team. Like FaZe might have upped that because they looked really good in terms of teamwork and everything, but like LAG is always going to be top in the league in practice, and they're going to have strats down. They're going to have because they change them basically every series they play. They adapt really fast, and they're always trying to figure out what the best thing to do against a certain team is and what their own strats are. They're constantly switching things up, and they look really prepared. Like that 100 Thieves series, they looked way, way better prepared than the 100 Thieves. It wasn't just like a guns won't warm yet kind of thing. It was just like they were just better and ready and prepped, and it was really impressive. And I don't think I don't think their ceiling and their peak is winning a major. I'd be surprised to be honest if they did. But just yeah, like Yas mentioned last podcast, do not sleep on them because they might beat you, and it'll look embarrassing. But that's kind of my thoughts on them.
I think one player I want to highlight from this roster. Obviously, people talk about apathy. Everyone knows Assault's the air. Silly's a guy that people talk about being dropped, even though he's had some good series. Vivid might be the most underrated player in the league right now. Like from a statistical standpoint as well. You look at it. He leads the league in hardpoint kills per 10 minutes. He is fourth in terms of control kills per 10 minutes. And he's, I think, sixth in S&D first blood percentage. That is incredible. So not only is he being super aggressive on the map, getting lots of kills, more kills than pretty much every person in the league in both the respawns, but he's also still doing his job that he did last year, which was getting first bloods in S&D. So overall, he's been playing fantastic. And I think that not enough people are talking about it because maybe his KDs don't reflect that. But these other advanced stats show that he is getting a lot of kills. He is getting the first blood in S&D. He's doing his job to help his team win. So I think more people should be talking about that. And I'd like to see how this team improves as the season progresses.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I would really comment on LAG in terms of like their teamwork. They are the best when it comes to teamwork. In my opinion, the only team that is better is Atlanta FaZe when it comes to teamwork. S&D, hardpoint control, you name it. They are really good on rotations, really good at retaking. If you remember that 100 versus LA Thieves series, like they were down 5-2, and when they were down 5-4, they had two retakes back to back, 4v4, bomb down, and they retaked it in a really good fashion. Like
Yeah.
playing trades, bait and switch, forcing LA teams to get out of their comfort zone. Really showed how good of a team they are. Also, not just Apathy and Vivid playing well. I think Cillian S&D has been playing really well. In Respawn, he hasn't been as good, but in S&D, he made some really clutch plays. I think he's the shot caller alongside Vivid in S&D. Don't get me. I'm not sure 100%, but like they have been showing how a team should play if they are playing versus a more talented team. Rely on your teamwork, not your gun skill.
Guess.
And that's why
So
that's why
sorry.
they play top 6. Yeah,
Yeah.
UG.
Sorry to cut you off. I was gonna say, guess where Silly is in terms of S&D KD.
Top
Like,
10?
don't top 10.
Oh,
What do you think,
Top
Pat?
top 5.
He's top 3. He's third. He's a 1.37 S&D KD.
Jesus.
He is tied with the Awakening. That is wild that he
Wow.
has that high. I didn't realize he was doing that well. Obviously, it helps when you have a guy like Vivid pushing in so far, but still, that's super impressive. But yeah, if that's all we have to talk about with regards to LG, we can move on to our team of the majors, which we talked about. Obviously, this was the consensus. If you guys have a different opinion, let us know. I personally wanted to add Diamond Khan, but Dashy stats are really hard to ignore, especially with the way he played this weekend. One thing I wanted to talk about is Abezy in particular. Obviously, a lot of people on Reddit were giving him love when Simp was announced as the major MVP, which Simp deserved it. Obviously, stats reflect so, but I think more people are understanding how important of a role Abezy is playing and how maybe stats on the surface may not reflect that. His advanced stats and the way he plays definitely passed the eye test for sure. I mean, in S&D first blood percentage, he's once again by far the leader, 28.7%. Again, really a catalyst for why they're so strong in S&D is Abezy's constantly getting first bloods, constantly putting on that pressure. And it makes him such a dangerous player to play against. It is a big reason why I think he.
Oh, I think we may have
Yeah,
lost. Oh, you're good. Okay.
iPad is back. But yeah, I think it's a big reason of why I think he should have been the MVP. He plays such an integral role on this roster, and we've talked about it numerous times in the past. So I'm just beating a dead horse at this point. But yeah, incredible player.
I usually back you. I usually agree and say that BZ is like more impressive because of his role, like you mentioned. But this past tournament, there were moments where Simp just took over. Like regardless of somebody going in first, like there were some gunfights he was winning that like nobody he was the person wasn't weak, he was just snapping. Like he was on one, especially in the grand finals too. But I think like I do agree that Simp makes his job a lot easier, but at the same time, Simp was on one this tournament. Like he was just special, especially again
Yeah.
against especially the grand final. That being said, though, I mean, these four players are nasty, and it's hard to pick one as the best like player in the game. But I'm gonna go with Hook in terms of being the best player in the game. I mean, he's the number one Slayer rating, second hardpoint KD, third overall KD. That's while he's IGLing as well, right? So he's literally doing everything he possibly can on the map to win, and also in comms to win as well. I mean, we obviously sung his praises earlier. We talked about Dallas, but it's so impressive, especially when you consider the fact that like he's doing that well against like the tiny terrors. Like he's doing that well consistently against teams. He hasn't had that many bad maps, and for a sub player, that's kind of rare. I feel like it's easier for sub players to have bad maps if they're just running into pre-aims and not the teams not rotating in time and stuff like that. So I think his performance has been, in my opinion, the most impressive. But what do you guys think? Who's the best player in the game?
Just one thought about Hugh. I would have agreed with you had it not been for his grand finals performance. I honestly did think he underperformed.
But the whole
Heavily.
team underperformed though. Like he still played fine. Like
The
the games
whole-
they
there were certain moments where he was definitely underperforming, even in comparison to the team, especially in those
fair.
hard points, which I felt were
Well,
what
he went
really
like
hurt them.
25 and 12 in one of the hard points though.
Yeah,
one
no,
that won.
the hard point they won, but all the ones that they lost, there was a point I felt like he was like 4 and 14 at one point. And like
Yeah.
I agree, like all the intangibles, all like if you had asked me who was the best player going into the grand finals, I would have said Hugh. But I don't think you can. I can't personally put him up there with the performance that he had in grand finals. I mean, I could bring up the stats while Paz gives his thoughts, but again, I agree with you on pretty much everything. It's just his performance in grand finals. I just can't put him up there as number one with the way he played that way. But again, yeah, definitely like in that conversation for sure. But Pat, who do you have as your best player in the game right now?
Okay, so I'm a firm believer that Abezy was the best player in Black Ops 4 and MW, but I think from now on we should just start saying Abezy and Simp are the best duo, and that there should be 2 MVP awards for both of them because
That's fair.
the way they are playing is actually incredible. Abezy's dropping 1.3 while entering, and like that's really amazing as well. And then you have Simp, like you trade Abezy, but then a dude trades you double as well. Like they go 1 for 4 because
Yeah.
Simp is dropping 1.5 in a whole tournament, whole major, which is incredible. And like, of course, Celium doesn't have to do much. Varsity is IGLing. Celium can just like put his controller down and just watch them fry because of the way they play together on a map. They are a cohesive unit, especially two of them. So basically, you're looking at two of the best players in the game, in my opinion, just doing absolutely everything to win the map, and they are doing it in a crazy way while entering and while being the first in. I think they should both be praised as much as they are getting praised right now. And like I think Hugh is like a top 3 player in the game right now, and Dash close fourth.
Yeah, actually, that's fair. Also, looking at the S&D KDs, a 1.65 from Simp is absolutely absurd.
Without a sniper too.
1.65 surge density. Holy
Without the
shit.
snipe. Without the snipe.
Without the sniper. That's insane. 1.65, that's crazy. Alright, maybe that's fine. That's insane, yeah. Jesus.
Yeah, but with that said, obviously, give us your thoughts. I mean, obviously, I know people will say, "Where is Zinni? Where is Zinni? Why isn't he up here?" Trust me, we'll have him on the team of the
Fucking mass, bro.
stage 2. But yeah, one thing we wanted to end up the podcast was talking briefly about the AM scene. Obviously, a bit of roster mania has gone down, especially in EU. Both team obtained, and it looks like I think Team Singularity is also split up. They say Trey has to fulfill his obligations on London, so maybe this means Zero is finally going to be in NA, which would be pretty cool if he is. Nice to see him help out London, but again, a bit of roster mania there. Really curious to see where guys like Bids land up, because I feel like with the players that are free agents right now, you could definitely create a roster that's but potentially could contend with Orglis and Rams. But I think Orglis, once again, they won this past weekend. They proved they're the best team in the game, in EU at least. I think the Rams are a close second, but when you have Vortex and Nasty playing the way they were and Josh IGLing, they're just going to be that much more dominant. In NA, my boy Insight, he got the job done. His new team alongside Twerk, Desi and Draza, they look like a force to be reckoned with. Again, they ended up taking down Wester this series, beating Sib's new team in the grand finals. Obviously, with a lot of the roster changes going on, it's going to be curious to see how the NA scene will look for stage 2. Wester, I expect obviously to get better with time. Poor Zap doesn't look like he has a team right now, which really sucks because I think he played really well in the Wester roster. And it looks like UT Crew signed up back together. Yeez, Rex, and Jintroy, but this time instead of Phantoms as they are, they got Monks. So that should be very interesting to see how that breaks down. But what did you guys make of the AM scene, and what are you expecting going into stage 2?
So I am now officially launching the Get Decimate back into the Pro League campaign. I After the first cup this year, Desi was frying. There's a specific map too on Control Garrison. He was just like melting people. And then obviously Western and subliners have started impressing, and Desi kept making roster changes and kind of fell out of the running. But over the last 2 cups they've played in, or 2 tournaments, he has been insane. He's very good. The thing with Desi was always like he kind of needs a structured team to play around, so it's not super easy to pick him up. Like you can't really expect to pick him up and him to be the like catalyst in sense of like he's going to bring in the strats and he's going to IGL. That's not really going to work, right? So I don't know if you can replace a guy like Slacked in that regard, but he's extremely good at this game, and I've liked him since he came in the game in World War II. So I'm now officially launching Decimate, getting back in the Pro League. I want to see it. Also in EU, just recently read on Reddit that apparently, I don't know if this is true or not, speculation, but Defrag and Weeman are kind of going back and forth as who should get dropped. And then,
I think that's a joke. I saw that.
It's a joke. Okay, all right.
I know we got baited by it before, so I don't know if it's true.
I keep getting baited by Defrag. God damn it! But I would like to see Afro and Zero team together, just because it'd be funny if like they started winning everything and London kept losing everything over here. The two subs playing well. Hopefully, eventually, via the situations will get figured out, and London could have the roster they want. But we'll see. Paj, any thoughts on the AM scene?
Yeah. Orglis is disgusting.
Yep.
And Rams
Yep.
as well. They are really, really, really well in front of everybody right now. I think Westar made the biggest mistake by swapping Phantoms and Zaptius. I think that's a mistake that will cost them a few cups, and for some like maybe a spot in the CDL next year, because like they were looking like a team that maybe like a team of 4 could be picked up for the next year, because why not? Because of how good they played, and now they do that, and doesn't make sense.
Yeah, they play opposite roles. One's a sub, one's like a main AR. I don't understand that.
Yeah, and one is a super aggressive sub, and the other is like a slowest AR. You can see like the only slower AR I know is accuracy. So
Yeah.
I don't know what were they thinking, but like you know, if it will work out in a sense of like them winning multiple cups again,
Mhm.
you know, we will will look stupid, because like, why are you switching at the one of the fastest sub in the AM scene for the slowest AR in the whole world? Like,
Well, it doesn't.
why?
I think like at a certain point though, Venom's like so good at this game. I think they can make it work still if they just play around him. He's incredible. I think I know I just said Decimate should be in the league, but Venom's, in my opinion, the number one guy in North America right now.
Oh,
He should be on a
100%.
roster. He is ridiculously good. So I think if they kind of play around him and the other guys figure it out, they can still definitely take cups. Like they'll be fine.
Yeah.
But it was a dumb pick.
Venom plays a lot like Huke in the sense where he's going for flanks, he's going for wraps, he's incredible in S&D.
He's great in
He
control.
makes great plays. Yeah.
Yeah, but that'll wrap it up. I think. If you guys have anything else to say.
Not that I know, but again, thank you, Patch, for coming on. Obviously, always delight to have you on. Your insight is very welcomed over here. But again, let us know what you guys want to see. Obviously, we got a bit of a break in terms of the CDL now, so it should be really entertaining to see when that ends up happening with the teams. Roster Mania, obviously, in Challengers is ever ongoing, so that should be very curious to see where that lands us for stage 2. But leave a like if you made it this far in the video. Comment down below what you want to see. And we'll see you in the next one. Thank you very much.
See you.